She's a presenter and reporter for BBC Sport, BT Sport and others too. Her story is brilliant and some great advice is provided. Here is episode 2 of Rich's Sports Media Show with Connie McLaughlin. Connie!
Hi Richard!
How are you?
I'm good now, I'm relaxed. I'm going to probably have someone beating the door down, my wee dog. So if you hear someone walk in, that's what it is. But yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, thank you for coming on. You report and present for BBC, BT Sport and more recently Celtic TV as well. Could you tell a little bit more about yourself, please?
Yes, so I, without giving you the full, life story, but I always wanted to be a journalist, and that was my passion. And I loved football, and my idea was always just to sort of marry the two together. And I started in local radio in Glasgow, and then moved down to Sky Sports News to do a radio programme for them. They were launching a new radio station that was supposed to be sort of to rival TalkSport at the time. I did that for a few years, honed my craft, as they say, and then moved back to Scotland. I had a little sort of bit of a break in between. I started a wellness business, which was something I was also really passionate about at the time. Took me over to the States to sort of try and to grow that business in Chicago and Los Angeles, which was an amazing experience. And then came back to Scotland a few years later, and really just, I'd kind of had enough. I think by that time I was sort of a little bit like fatigued with the whole process of going to a presser, same chat every week. You know, it's like it was just that treadmill of football journalism, and I think I was a bit tired of it all, and I think I was looking for something different around it. And that time away from it reminds you of how much actually it's not even like a job, it's something really like, it's a privilege to be able to do. And when I came back to the UK, I'd had an opportunity to go back into the BBC just sort of part-time while I was building a business here in the UK. And then it snowballed again, and it was like in a process of, well, I do this, and then opportunities just sort of opened up, and then the last few years I've just been building on that, so working with BT and as you say, Final Score, 5 Live, and now recently with Sunset and Vine, who produce Celtic TV in Glasgow. So it's been a really cool experience, and it feels like I don't know, it's been a journey that's not been very linear, that's for sure, but certainly enjoyable.
That's really interesting, having the wellness side as well. Does that help you in a way, take your mind away from reporting and presenting?
I think so. I think it helps you to be probably more appreciative of your job when you're sitting in a stadium and it's -5 and you're freezing and you think, oh, why am I sitting here? And it certainly helps you, I think, to be more mindful of where you are and the privileges that brings, certainly. And it's just a really good laugh. Like I think using the time that I did within our buzz, which was my wellness business, I think it's helped me see the joy a little bit more in things and not take stuff too seriously. Like we always hear this phrase about life being too short, and I think it's really, really sort of been brought into focus this year in particular. And for me, it's been about trying not to be striving too much towards a particular goal in terms of like, well, by this age I want to be on this channel or I want to be doing this. It's just more about actually really having a look around you and seeing actually what's happening right now and really just enjoying that. And I think the more that you're enjoying that process of what you're doing actually sort of propels you along a bit quicker than you probably would have if you're trying to kind of look ahead and see what the next thing is. I genuinely think that's what the wellness business has helped me with. I think it's probably helped me be a better broadcaster as well, because it's helped me be more calm. I think it's helped me to connect with people a bit more, so be more compassionate towards people when you're speaking to them, which probably doesn't make you the best hard-hitting journalist, but I think it certainly makes you more compassionate and maybe makes the interviews more interesting, I think, anyway.
Exactly, because no one wants to listen to a monotone reporter or presenter. They want to hear a bit of enthusiasm. I was watching your Showreel and saw you were extremely enthusiastic, and you don't see that with some. How important do you think having that enthusiasm and I guess a bit of fun is?
Yeah, Yeah, I think, do you know what? I think one thing I found, Richard, is like the more you can just be you, the more that you connect with people. I genuinely find that. I think that, and if you're naturally, I mean, I grew up in a house where, like, I've got three older brothers, and you're never allowed anything to be too serious. You're always getting the mick ripped out of you. So I think for me, it's been, I've grown up in that environment where humour is something that we use all the time. So it's part of your DNA, really. And I think that for me, any program that I do, I'm always trying to sort of bring that to it and just bring more of me. I think for years, actually, it's funny because I always find that the more sort of like serious news stuff I tried to do, I struggled a bit with. Not like with the content of it, because I think that there's times where you need to sort of switch that up and have a balance of tone. But when I was doing that all the time and I didn't have any freedom really to bring myself into it, I don't think that I thrived in that environment. So for me, the more I can be me and the more I'm given that freedom to sort of just go with it, which, to be fair, on a Saturday in BT, that's really what you're paid to do, is to bring something different. And that was great to be able to have that freedom just to have a laugh with it. But equally, if something serious happens, then you're bringing that information to people, and you're bringing it in a way that has the gravitas that's required of whatever situation you're reporting on. So I think bringing you is really important, and I think with that comes the fact that you're not always just humorous, or you're not always just enthusiastic. There's a balance in each person, isn't there? So it's equally important to bring both.
You mentioned your older brothers there as well. Did your interest in sport develop when you were younger in the house, or did it come at a later stage?
Well, do you know, weirdly, so my middle brother is also a sports reporter. So he's a correspondent for the BBC in sports news. And probably we were the only two in the house that had any interest in football. Like, my other brother's not so much. My stepdad wasn't interested in football at all. So I don't know. I've thought about that often, actually, and it doesn't feel necessarily that that's the case. I think for me, maybe there was an introduction to it through my middle brother. But I was more interested in Italian football, so I was always had a really big thing about Italian football, and I think that it wasn't necessarily about what I was shown when I was younger, because the programs that I was shown when I was younger, actually, frankly, at times were quite boring. They were quite like, almost like watching stuff that you'd be like, oh God, it seemed like for like older men. It didn't really speak to younger people, and particularly younger females. And then when I watched Football Italia, for me, like, watching James Richardson and the way that he presented that, and the content and the almost magazine-y feel was really, really unique, and I'd never seen that before. And it was almost that aha moment of like, oh my God, so this is what you can do with this. You can make this fun, you can make this enjoyable, you can make this something that you really want to watch. And that's really, I think, where my love affair with it began, because I realised that it could be the two parts of me, which we spoke about there. It could be something really fun and enthusiastic, but equally it's like, no, football is serious, because it's like, if you support a team, you want them to win, and it can be the difference between people feeling good in their life and not feeling good in their life, and that's the reality of it.
And then your interest in sport media itself, where did that come from?
I think I always knew that whenever you're younger, and whatever games you play whenever you're a young child, I think that sort of gives you a good indication about the areas that you're interested in and things that might be quite good as a job. And I remember always pretending to be presenting a programme from I was 5 or 6. I used to stand in my nana's back garden and pretend that I was presenting a gardening programme with her plants and stuff. And like, just playing myself and just like really enjoying that interaction with this pretend audience that clearly, I don't know where I'd got this from. I'd obviously been seeing it on TV and thought it was a good laugh. But then I think I realised that the way into that was through journalism, and I love writing. I always had a real sort of, for me, drama and English and languages were always the thing that I was really interested in at school. And it just seemed a sensible route into something that I wanted to do. And and it all sort of kicked off in terms of trying to have an educational path towards that.
And then did you go to university and do a journalism related degree straight away, or did you do something else?
No, so there was only really one at the time in Scotland, which was the Napier degree, which I honestly blagged my way into. I don't even know how I managed to get into that course, because there was only like 20 odd people, I think, on that course. And I don't even think at the time I had the hires I needed to get into it. And I managed to get in. So I did the interview for it and was given the chat about what I wanted to do, and it obviously seemed to resonate with someone because they let me in. But I was only 17, and it was in Edinburgh, and I lived in Glasgow at the time. I didn't drive, and it seemed, it's only, my God, it's 30 miles difference. 35 miles is nothing when you're an adult and you're driving, and it's, I drive to the north of England, or the top of the country in a day and not even think about it on a weekly basis. But when you're that age, it seems a very, very sort of far away, it's another city, and it's a big deal. And I lasted, I think, about 7 weeks because I struggled with just the logistics of it all. I don't think I was ready, to be honest, to go to uni. And I spent a year after that thinking, right, oh dear. I also, at that point, I struggled quite a bit with anxiety, and at that time, at that age in particular, quite badly. And I think for me, being closer to home, I was able to manage that a wee bit more. And being far away, it just didn't sit, I think, where I was at mentally at that point, which I can only really see now that you reflect on it. I didn't really identify that at the time as the reason. But I knew that there was a course in Glasgow that we're going to start doing a journalism course, so I started doing that. But they said it would be like in 2 years' time. So if I started doing like a sort of social sciences course, I could then transfer, and that would be me, have my journalism degree. But it never happened. And I think it was like only if it was a few years after I left that they actually did that course. So I had to go and do a postgrad. But the postgrad actually was in broadcast journalism, which is what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do print journalism; it wasn't my thing, and it was probably worked out for the best. And for that broadcast journalism postgrad was just amazing experience, really hands-on. Being in a newsroom, you got to meet amazing people from the industry in this country, and there's still people who are in my year at that course, who I know now. So that was a really good experience.
How did your university experience compare to what it's actually like in the industry? Was it similar?
In the postgrad, yes and no. I think you only really get that experience when you're actually on air. That feeling of what you get when you're on air. I think it's a really good thing to do. I know loads of people who didn't do it and are, still able and capable and really thrive at their job. But for me, I think it was a really good grounding to do it. I think things are so competitive now that I think it's a good basis to have. But I see so many people, and I was thinking about this recently, who started maybe in radio or in telly doing sort of like AP jobs or right at the very beginning doing runners jobs or doing whatever they can to try and to get a foot in the door, and they're maybe further down the line than they would have been if they'd went to uni. So I never know like what's the right thing. I think certainly for me the right thing to do was what I did, because you can't change anything. But I think there's never one way to get to a certain point, and it's about feeling the way that's right for you. But it was a good experience, and it was fun. But you don't really learn properly until you're on the job, I don't think.
Then while you were on that broadcast journalism degree, did you go out and get experience during your time on that, or did you get that afterwards?
Oh no, yeah, I did work experience. I actually was thinking about, it's funny that you were talking about this. I was thinking the other day about an exclusive that I got, right, with Westlife. Don't even ask. And it was, I remember, like, I'm always, there's a phrase in Glasgow which is having a brass neck, and I was always quite good at having a brass neck, which meant I was I was always quite up for just sort of getting in and doing something and diving in. And I remember I knew that they were going to be, Westlife were going to be at this particular radio station, and I thought, I'm going to go and get an interview with them. I'm going to just go and doorstep them. And I did, and the questions were an abomination. Honestly, they were shocking. I think I was more focused on the fact I'm like, oh, I'm talking to Nikki Byrne from Westlife, or there's Mark from Westlife, or there's Shane, or whatever. It was more that moment of like, well, I've done it, and there was no thought whatsoever going into actually what these questions were going to be. And honest to God, I must have got about a 5 or 6 second clip from it. There's nothing I could have even hardly used. But it was just that learning of now thinking, right, well, actually, when you do an interview, like, your questions are posed in a way that you're trying to get that person to actually talk. That's usually, a good starting place. And that was like, you only really learn, like, it's the same as I think back when I was learning to drive. You only really learn something, people can tell you it, but when you actually know why you need to know it, then it sinks in. That's certainly how I learn. And then I realise when I'm going to prepare a bulletin or something and I've only got a clip that's 6 seconds long, I'm like, right, well, actually, if I'd posed the question a different way, I could have got something that was better. So, yeah, I mean, the experience at that point, I think, was useful, and you were learning all the time. But equally, I'm still learning. I'm 13 years down the line and I'm still, I make mistakes and I think, oh my God, like, what was I thinking? And you're learning all the time. So I think that's always important to never kind of think that you've cracked it,
That's hilarious. Were you a big Westlife fan at that point?
I was. And again, it was one of those things for me. It started off actually as a joke with a friend. So the whole way through uni, I worked in with British Gas. I had a brilliant job. Really lucky to have that because it worked alongside being at uni. And then when I was doing my postgrad, I could do my postgrad during the day and I worked there at night. And I had like a team of agents who I managed, and they were like selling products like gas and electricity and all that sort of different stuff. But it was such a good laugh. Honestly, it was the chat was brilliant. And then there was a girl actually who was one of the other managers. She was really into Westlife, and I was always like, for God's sake. And then actually, the more she indoctrinated me, she like brainwashed me into like loving them. And then I realised actually, what's not to love? A little bit of musical cheese, enjoying it. So yeah, that's really where that all kicked off from. And I got I actually met them a few times latterly, and then ended up going on a night out with Nikki Byrne latterly as well after some sort of Celtic dinner. So yeah, these things tend to come around full circle.
Did they recognise you those other times?
Oh, I'm pretty certain no. I mean, I'm sure they were like really kind and being like, oh my God, like, yeah, from like we chatted last time. But they probably meet about 1 million people, reporters and presenters a day. So I enjoyed the fact that they were very kind, but I'm pretty certain they had no idea who I was.
And I guess that's a great example of throwing yourself in the deep end as well, which happens in industry quite a lot. Have you been thrown in the deep end in the industry itself?
Oh, listen, I feel like I'm thrown in the deep end every single day I go to work. But I like that. I love, like, honestly, I think that some people really love and strive in that stress, because it's stress. It's just all about managing your levels of stress. And for me, that's something that, for whatever reason, I think it maybe goes back to that time where, talking about the anxiety side of it, I was kind of used to being in that state of like hyper alertness. And actually, when you're on air or you're doing like a bigger program, that's basically the state that you're in, even though that it's more managed and it's more controlled. But actually, from a cortisol level perspective, that's actually where you're sitting. So actually, when I look back, I think maybe that wasn't such a bad thing, an experience to have, because now you're used to being there, and you can not only like cope with it, but you can kind of thrive in it, and you're able to perform in that sort of like place. And I think that's quite useful whenever you need to be able to think quite quickly and be able to do things under pressure.
And I suppose going out with Nikki Byrne and Night Out and everything, that all comes into networking as well, doesn't it?
Well, exactly. That's what I like to think. It was all about networking at the time. And remember those times where we used to be able to have nights out? Seems like a long time ago.
Exactly. It seems like seems like a real privilege to have had those opportunities, doesn't it? But did you network a lot when you were trying to get that experience and get in the industry? How did you get your first sort of experience?
So I think there's definitely people that are better at networking than me. I think people who love that sort of, who are really good at selling themselves. And I'm really good at selling stuff, not as good at selling myself. I think I always kind of more sit back with that. And it's certainly something I think I've tried to work on, because you do need to do this in this industry. But no, in terms of my first, when I got my first job at Radio Clyde, it was purely because I'd already been in there, getting that experience that we spoke about when I was doing my postgrad. And then I suppose I built relationships with people. I think I'm probably quite good at doing that, because I like folk. I just like talking to people. And I think if that naturally is something that you like to do, then people engage with that, and you create relationships quite easily. But yeah, I mean, I think building those relationships and selling what you do is definitely important. And now for me, I work with an agent who helps me do that, and I think that's definitely has helped me be more aware of how I do that and how I build those relationships. But I think you can always be better.
Well, you can always work on things, can't you? But in the first episode of this with Ade Oladipo, he said he thinks it's important for people looking to break into the industry, gain that experience. It's important to do free work. Did you do much free work, and what are your sort of thoughts on doing free work?
Oh my God, so much free work. Yes. I remember actually the first paid one that I did was a boxing press conference, and I got paid a fiver. And that was a big deal. Although actually the girl who was the news editor at that time still disputes it was only a fiver, because I actually work with her now. She's like, oh, surely it was more than a fiver. And I'm like, don't actually think it was. Anyway, I was grateful for that at the time, because I think it was the first paid gig that I'd got. And I remember being like, wow, this is a big deal. But I think that there's definitely you need to be able to be proactive, as you say, networking, but also equally doing the work. Like I don't in any way advocate exploitation, because I think people can take the mick a little bit with that. I think that there comes a point where you need to be paid for your value. But I think that you can't go in and expect to earn, a exceptionally good salary when you've been out of uni for a year. I think that you need to learn. I mean, I think my first job, actual salary job, I was on £16,000 a year, and that's like, I was living with my parents at the time, which was obviously good, but I don't know how I could have lived if I was earning that on my own. I would have struggled, and I think that now you think back on jobs that you did and ways that you tried to, like, I was so grateful for that salary. That was like amazing, and I just had to try and supplement that in different ways. So taking other freelance shifts at different places and trying to build that up so that I was able to live and able to sort of like, rent a flat or buy somewhere eventually further down the line, or save money. I mean, that's these are, you need to still live your life, as well. Because if you need to be like, have like, it's almost like that kind of Maslow hierarchy of needs, of having that thing where you need to be safe and secure, so you're not worrying about your rent, or you're not worrying about somewhere to live, and you're not worrying about eating food, to be able to do this other stuff properly as well. So there needs to be a real balance. But I think, if you're in a position where you can work for free, which I was, because I had the support of my parents, then that's definitely something that I think I would advocate, to say, just go and get the experience, because it's not really free. It's actually more like you're gaining from this. They're getting something obviously from it as well, but you're equally, you're getting the value from it by learning, which, we know how much it costs to learn these days, particularly at universities and colleges. So but there comes a point where you need to be able to say what you're worth, and say what you're willing to do and for how much. I think that's important as well.
Exactly, it's an absolute fortune. That boxing event, was it a big one?
I can't even remember. I can't even remember who it was. I think it was like something for St Andrew's Boxing Club, maybe. It was, I don't remember, but it was a big one for me anyway, so much so that I don't remember who it was. But certainly it was a big moment, because I'd never covered a press conference before. I was quite nervous. I was really nervous, actually.
So you've reported on football, boxing. What other sports have you sort of reported on before?
A lot. I do love doing boxing, so I know I've presented quite a few of the live boxing uh, matches for the BBC, which has been really fun. So there's been some decent sort of like nights of boxing that we've had recently with Lee McGregor, Cash Farouk. They were two sort of big ones. I've done, oh, goodness me, there's very rarely I think you'd find a sport at some point in the last few years that I've not managed to have some sort of interest in, and particularly because with the Commonwealth Games. So I was doing bowls recently, which was really interesting. I'd never really watched a game of bowls before, but then actually when I covered that, I presented that for BBC Scotland as well. And honestly, by the end of it, I was like hooked. It was amazing. That was really, really interesting. And amazing people, lovely people. Tennis, swimming, athletics, yeah, like pretty much all the goodies.
And for those sports like bowls that you may not know a lot about, how much preparation do you have to put into those?
Tons, honestly, loads. Because football in a way is really easy because it's a sport that you know really well, and it just things come naturally. Like terminology comes naturally to you. If you know a sport and you get, so say for example, it was football and someone said something wrong, describing a free kick or something, and you'd be like, automatically it jerks you because you're like, oh, that person clearly doesn't know what they're talking about. So very, very quickly you can see, and it's quite transparent if you don't know what you're talking about. So I always try and make sure that I don't put myself in that position just by like learning as much as I can and listening to as many people talking about it as possible and just trying to sort of replicate that. But equally, when I'm doing those interviews, I'm actually trying to find out more about it when I'm interviewing people. So I'm hoping that the audience that's watching it might not be fully up to speed with everything as well. They might be quite new to the sport. So I think you need to strike that balance right of getting the basics really right, but and allowing your contributors or your pundits or whatever to put the detail around it instead of trying to tie yourself up in knots. I think that's always quite useful.
And you obviously report on television and radio as well, which are obviously very different. Is there a different level of preparation for each of those, or do you just put the same in?
No, I don't tend to look at them very differently. I think you put the same level of preparation. If I'm presenting a match, then obviously the programme's longer, so you're looking at areas, talking points that you want to fill for particular segments of the programme. So you need to prep a little bit more for that. But in terms of like knowing about the teams or where you want to go with it, then I think that you need to put as much preparation as you can.
And I noticed you've got over 26,000 followers on Twitter, over 14,000 on Instagram. How did you build them up? Did you have a strategy, or did they just come naturally?
I've no idea, actually. I've still no idea how that's the case. I think Twitter probably, people come there because they want information, don't they? And I think that the more that you talk about football and the more that I struggle with Twitter in a way because I used to be really quite active on it, and now I think I'm very aware of what I put out on there because you're very rarely getting anything, like you have to ask yourself, like, what am I posting this for? Like, what's the purpose of this? And if it's the purpose is to create engagement or to create I don't know, there's to create engagement, or there's to tell a story, or there's to give information, or are you just kind of doing it because you feel as if you should? Then I have to ask myself that quite a lot, because you do particularly in Glasgow, because of the Celtic and Rangers thing, you do get a lot of people who you just get a lot of abuse, and a lot of the time I just can't really be bothered with that. I can't be bothered with like that whole feeling of when you put a tweet out, you're a bit like, oh, what's going to come back. And I think that you need to sort of be very careful with thinking about, as I say, the reason why you're on Twitter or the reason why you're on Instagram. Not so much, because I think I share quite a lot about Instagram, not just about work, but about my general life and things that I do, just because it's quite fun, and I quite enjoy the engagement that I've got with people there. So maybe that draws people because of that, and I think also people just like to maybe have interest in people who have jobs in areas they're interested in. Maybe, I don't know, you probably need to ask them. But yeah, social media, I think, I've got kind of at times I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, because I don't really like the other side of it that can create, I think, a bit of disturbance in your life. And I think that you just need to be very careful how you treat it, and almost kind of keep it almost over here. And that's what I try and do.
Yeah, Twitter can be quite a toxic environment. And I noticed you posted ahead of presenting on Celtic Motherwell for Celtic TV the words "be kind." Have you had negative comments towards you on social media before from the likes of trolls? And if you did, how'd you deal with them?
Loads, yeah, loads. I don't tend to deal with it very well. I mean, I'd like to sit here and say, oh, it doesn't really bother me. I just kind of let it water off a duck's back, but it does. It's not very nice. And I think that whenever you now, honestly, I very, very rarely actually go through the comments. So I'll be very cautious. And the reason I wrote that on the Celtic announcement, "Be kind," was because obviously there's a lot of people from all different teams that follow me. And I think that there's always this thing in Glasgow about trying to out you as a particular supporter. And I don't know how useful that is, because I think that's suggesting that you are unable to do your job if you've had a background in supporting a team. Whereas the likelihood is that if you're interested in football and have a passion for football and love football, which is usually the reason you do this job, high percentage chance that you support a football team, and high proportion or high percentage of a chance that if you're from the west of Scotland, that you probably support either Celtic or Rangers at some point, or have done in the past as a child. But in this part of the world, you don't tend to talk about that, or it's something that you don't tend to highlight. But if you're a mile up the road or 10 miles up the road, it's okay if you support Motherwell, or it's okay if you support St Johnstone or Hamilton, and people can talk about that quite openly. But if you're from either side of Glasgow, whether it's Celtic or Rangers, you're really quite, it's almost like you're not able to then do your job because you're biased. And I think that's actually quite harsh, because most people in the media, let's be perfectly honest, particularly in Scotland, do have had at some point an affiliation to a certain team, because you're a football fan. It doesn't mean to say that you can't be you can't do your job properly, or you can't be completely impartial when you're reporting. I think that's quite unfair, but unfortunately it's just the reality of the way people think.
Yeah, that's quite interesting as well. Especially like Celtic TV, it's a club channel. You obviously report for BBC, BT Sport. Did you have to prepare for that differently, or think a little bit more about what you said in terms of keep making sure it's positive about the team you're presenting for?
Well, I think I did have to think about that differently, because when I'm working for anyone else, you're working on a news basis. So you're thinking about, it from a point of view of you're thinking about news lines and the stories that are making the headlines that people are talking about. And 100% you can do that with Celtic TV. But equally, I've got to remember that my audience is a different audience. And when you're doing any sort of job, the first question that you ask is, who are my audience and what is it I'm trying to say to them? And I think that was the difference for me, is that I'm 100% we're speaking to a different audience, and what does that audience want to hear, and trying to sort of fulfill that role the best way that I could, which just it takes a different approach.
And away from that now, do you have positive relationships with other reporters and presenters, and how important is it to sort of support each other in this industry?
Oh yeah, massively. I mean, I've a lot of my good close friends have a similar job, and I think that's really useful to be able to have people that you can talk to about certain things, or you can ask questions, or you can just have someone who gets you and gets the I suppose the working world that you live in. It's really important to have that safety, and I think it's important to have that sort of camaraderie, because particularly for me, because I work on my own, so being freelance, I work with different teams. you're part of a lot of teams, but not part of any, if that makes sense. So having that relationship with other people who are, freelance and who have a similar experience, I think it's just important to have that connection, and particularly now when we're not seeing as many people day to day. I think that comes into focus even more.
Spoke about your showreel earlier as well. How beneficial is it to have a really good showreel like that to show potential future employers?
Well, when I first started working with the management company that I work with, Crown, they were like, "This is really important," because it's funny because you think that you know what you do, and you think that actually it's like your ability, but so you just automatically assume that everyone else does, but you don't, and that goes back to that selling thing again, giving yourself the best opportunity to show what you've done, and just helping people to find it, so not making it difficult for people to find that information, just putting it in front of their face and saying, here, it's here. People are not going to go and search for that. Highly unusual that you think, oh, if people are looking for a presenter or a reporter for a particular program, it's human nature that what they'll do is they'll likely give that to the person that's in closest proximity to them, or they can see. And if you make it easier for them to see you, then you're giving yourself a better opportunity to get work. That's the fact.
And then to create that showreel as well, you obviously have to have a knowledge of editing as well. Is that something you learnt on your broadcast journalism course, or did you develop that sort of afterwards? And also, what sort of skills have you developed after your course that you realised you actually need in the industry or would be useful?
The editing, so from a showreel point of view, I always think it's better to get someone to do that for you, because unless you're like whiz hot, editing specialist, get someone else to help you with that. I always think that what anything you do, if there's an area that you think actually I need to grow on, ask for someone's help or pay for it, and really learn that skill, or get someone else to do it for you. Editing for me is something that I need to do, so I produce as well for BBC Scotland at certain points, and I edit whenever I'm producing. But I don't do that very often, so I do that maybe once a month or once every couple of months, and you get back into the swing of doing that, and then you don't do it again for a while. So it's not something that I would be like, right, I'm a fabulous editor, because I'm absolutely not. Radio editing I was probably better at because I did it for a longer time, but again, I've not done that. When you work for larger organisations, that's someone's specific job. So if I'm working for, say I'm presenting for 5 Live, someone's job is to edit and collate that material. Someone else's job is to produce that programme. They'll write scripts and stuff for you, but then because I've produced as well, because I've written my own scripts, I'll then probably go back over stuff and rewrite bits and pieces for me that's important for the way I speak and my own tone. And so I think these skills are all very useful to have. I don't think that just going into a job with one particular skill helps you, because I think that you need to understand all the components of how it works to be able to be better at the particular job that you're doing. But again, that comes with time. It comes with time and experience. And if I think there's something I listened to recently on a podcast about say yes more often. So if you're being offered something and you think, well, actually that's not really what I want to do, like try it and see if it works for you, and see if if you can gain any more experience from it. But you don't have to necessarily deviate from the path that you're on.
You mentioned there about asking for other people's help. Did you find people were willing to help, or was it difficult to get help?
So all people can say is no. And I think what I realise is that sometimes people say no because actually that's absolutely fine. Maybe their diary's too busy, or they need to have focus on something else. But a lot of the time people will be open to helping, and like I'm sure if whoever it is that you're reaching out to, my thought was, they've probably got like loads of people that'll do the same. Yeah, they probably do have a list of emails or requests or whatever to do things or to help, whatever. But particularly at the moment, like people are not as busy as they were before, so if they're not working full time, or they they don't have, you know, as busy a schedule, then most people are kind, and most people are kind with their time. And I think that asking that question is always a good place to start, and you know, not being afraid of if someone says no, thanks very much, okay, go on to the next person.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see it as a bit of a way of practicing as well, because as journalists and things like that, you've got to ask plenty of questions to other people. So it's a way of building up that courage, I guess.
Absolutely.
And life's full of experiences, but what sort of experiences have you gained while working in the industry? Have you been able to travel a bit?
Loads. Honestly, I've been very, very, very lucky to travel lots of different places, like places I probably would never have gone to before. Macedonia, Lithuania, you know, Czech Republic, lots of like Eastern European countries randomly. You know, getting to go to the Nou Camp, the Amsterdam Arena, you know, going to amazing places that actually seem. I was in Copenhagen recently actually for the Europa League, which was a really cool experience. Somewhere that I've been wanting to go for ages, and just, you know, for whatever reason I've never managed to get to, and Celtic were drawn to FC Copenhagen in the Europa League, and I was like, yes, great opportunity to go out there and have a bit of time to, not only just because it's great to see other countries, but also having that other match day experience of a shoot. So like the things that happen from, you know, when you first arrive, and you know, to get into the presser and the day before, you know, the whole match day experience, the post match experience. Like there's loads of really important parts of your development, things that you can learn by being able to have that experience. I think I'm so lucky to have done that. I mean, like the Euros are coming up, and that's going to be something that's hopefully I get to be involved in. And I've never been part of a European Championships or a World Cup before, because, you know, certainly from a Scottish perspective, we've never been there for a long time. So that's something I'm looking forward to. But you know, we had the Commonwealth Games, and being part of like bigger events is something I really enjoy doing. I've covered the golf quite a lot in Scotland, so I covered the Open, the British Open, Scottish Open. That's, you know, I used to love covering the golf. It was such a great few days, and just seeing a different sport as well, and how a different sport works, and just being able to sort of to immerse yourself in that for a weekend is really special. And also the catering's always fabulous at the Open, or it used to be. Honestly, the Scottish Open used to be like my favourite weekend of the year, because they used to like fill you up with amazing like cakes and like scones and amazing lunches. And it's all about the lunches after all.
Exactly. You've always got to be thinking about your belly at the end of the day. I've been
The best snacks.
I've spoken to a few athletes about when they travel, and they sort of say they go straight to the hotel, straight on the racetrack, and then go back to their hotel again. But when you travel, do you get to see much of the places, or is it sort of, I'm here to work, I'm just going to concentrate on that?
No, I mean, I think, you know, you are there to work, but there can be definitely times where you've got some downtime, and maybe if you're going to do a shoot, or you're going to do an interview, and you need to get, or whoever you're with, the producer and cameraman, need to get shots of, you know, wherever we are. Then you get to go along, and you're seeing it, and you're maybe wanting to speak to local people because you're maybe doing a package about where you are, and so you do get opportunities. I remember being in Iceland once, and funnily enough, what I found is when you work for radio, you get less downtime than you do when you work for telly. That's for sure. And who was I think it was Scotland were playing Iceland in some qualifier, and everyone else got a chance to go to the hot spas, you know, the springs, and everyone else was like trottling off to go with their towels and everything, to go and you know, enjoy this amazing sort of natural wonder of Iceland. And I'm sitting in the hotel room like editing copy and thinking, that's one thing I remember thinking, God, when, like, you know, when's the next time I'm going to be in Iceland? I'm going to get a chance to be here and do that, and I didn't get to go. So it's not all like glamour and great nights out and all the rest of it, as much as, you know, you do have opportunities sometimes to see that, but there's some times where you're like, I need to go back now and on time to do that.
There's obviously lots of sports journalism courses as well nowadays. That's what I studied as my undergrad. And on our course, we didn't have any females on it at all. What would you say to a female wanting to study the likes of sports journalism but isn't sure about the potential of being the only woman on the course?
Well, I would say that if that's what you want to do and you're passionate about it, you know, I don't think it would have put me off, but everyone's different. And I think you need to ask yourself the reason that you want to do it in the first place. And if that outweighs the uncomfortableness of being the only female, then it's up to them to balance that question out, whatever way works best for them. But I mean, compared to when I first started, there's so many more women involved in sport now, in particular journalism. I mean, there's tons. So I think that definitely you still see the imbalance when I'm at a press conference. I'll see the imbalance, or when I look around a press box, you know, there's still only maybe one or two of us. After that, I don't really tend to think about it. I don't really tend to. It's not something. Maybe it's just because I've been so used to it for so long since I started. But I think that, you know, there's definitely opportunities, and there's more opportunities now. And if it's something you're really passionate about, then, you know, it shouldn't be something that I don't think stops you.
Yeah, exactly. If you're enjoying what you do, what's the point in letting anything get in the way of it at the end of the day? And then the whole sort of point of this podcast is to give advice to people wanting to break into the industry or looking for a career change. So what sort of advice would you give to both of those, I guess, more students looking to maybe study the likes of sports journalism, or somebody who isn't enjoying their career and is thinking, yeah, I'd love to work in sport media, or I'd love to do what they do?
So I always think that advice is a tricky thing because everyone's pathway is very different, you know, and what works for one person might not work for someone else. And I remember when I was trying to break in, I remember people coming to do talks and stuff with us, about how they managed to sort of break through into journalism. And I remember people telling me, you know, well, it's not very well paid, and, you know, it'll be really long hours, not very many people make it and stuff. And I always remember thinking in my head, well, that might have been your experience, that's not going to be my experience. I remember honestly always thinking that, and thinking, well, you must not have been that good then. but it showed you a real, for me, like, probably lack of understanding and a little bit arrogance. But I think that you need that single-mindedness to be able to think about what you want to do, and take it and look around you at what people are doing 100%, and taking bits and pieces from different places, I think, is really important. But the more I think that the more you get to know yourself, and the more I think you get to know the reasons why you're doing particular things, or the reason why, like, why do you want to be a sports journalist? What's the reason? Because you love sport, right? Well, that's one thing. But what else? What are the other reasons? Asking yourself these questions, I think, are super important, because if it's because you want to, I don't know, like, whatever the reason would be for you, like, I would peel that back a bit more, and you can maybe actually find that it's maybe not really sports journalism you want to do. It's maybe just journalism, or it's maybe just radio, and there's other things within radio that you like to do, or it's television, and there's other things within television, and it's not necessarily. And if it's about the writing, there's other ways to express yourself in the written form. You know, honestly, for any age group, whether it be a student coming through or if you're changing anything, get to know you and get to know what you want, your likes, your dislikes, your reason for being, and then those little breadcrumbs will take you forward, and to whatever that looks like for you. Because sometimes when you start, it might not always, where you get to might not always be the point that you thought it was going to be, and being okay with that as well.
That single-mindedness is really important, I think, because if you get the idea that I might not make it, what's the point in not trying and doing something for the rest of your life that you don't enjoy? What is your opinion on people going against what they want to do and doing something they don't enjoy, because they could turn around in a few years and say, look, I actually really want to do that, and have to start all over again?
Yeah, I think. Listen, I think this generation of us as people have this idea that we have to enjoy every single thing that we do and live your best life and live in your joy and everything else. And I'm all for that. But hard work comes along with that as well. You're not always going to love every single part of your job. You're not always going to love every single thing that you do. But if you can sit back and really say, like, again, that question, like, why am I doing this? Like, for me, the reason that I do, I think, the job that I do, and particularly I do a program on a Sunday morning, and it's about allowing people, talking, having really conversations to help people to share their stories. And for me, like, the job that I do is about connecting with other human beings, and because I love that and I think I'm good at it, and I found that out about myself. um, and that's the reason for me wanting to do this job. I mean, I could, and it just so happens that I'm able to do it about football, which is something I'm passionate about, but it doesn't mean to say that I don't enjoy doing programs about anything else that I'll do programs about. It's more about that experience of using the talents that you have, and figuring out that sort of the reason and purpose that you've got, and trying to marry them both together. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah. So not being too, like, it's not about, if people are trying to give you advice, or if people are sharing with you more feedback than advice, then take it on. Because like we've all seen people who are, whether it's on the X Factor, and they're coming through and they just can't sing. They can't sing, but they're definitely, they're dogged and they're determined that they're going to do this, and they want to have this career, because it's not going to happen for you. But actually, ultimately, if the thing for them is that they just want to be famous, or they just want to be seen, or they just want to, it's about peeling that thing back at the very beginning, saying, right, what do I want? What is it about this that attracts me? What is it about this that's the reason and purpose that I want to do this in the first place? And answer those questions, and you'll be taken down paths, I think, that'll be much more fulfilling for you. Because you're right, it might be the case that you are doing a job that's not necessarily what you want to do, but you might be getting paid £200,000 to do it, and actually the life that you live out with that job is more fulfilling, because you can make choices of going travelling or do the things you want to do, and it lets you do that by the job that you don't particularly love, but it opens up opportunities elsewhere. Or you can do a job that pays you 20 grand a year, but you feel great in doing it, but actually can't pay your rent. So there's the reality of this. There is the reality of this that says, like, that it starts with that question of really knowing you, and figuring out actually that earning that 20 grand a year might be okay. And it might be the case that the other things around you you're not too bothered about, and actually that's the most important. Figuring out the things that are important to you is key.
Exactly. I think you touched on it there, the whole work-life balance. What's your work-life balance like?
At the moment, during COVID, or just generally, do you think?
Well, both. Like, how much has it changed during COVID?
It's changed a lot. I think probably I erred on the side of working too much before, traveling too much. I travelled quite a lot before, and I think I probably paid the price a little bit for that, with my health. So I had COVID at the beginning of March, and that sort of spiraled into long COVID, which I genuinely think was probably because I was really run down, because I'd been working too much. I don't have any medical evidence to back that up, but I think you know your own body. And I think this period for me has been more relaxed, because I've not been working as much. But I love working. I love doing what I do. And I think that, for me, you really do need that balance of spending time at home, because, I love being at home. I'm absolutely so blessed to have the most amazing fiance and dog and family and all the rest of it. And we live like in a house that we love and all the rest of it. But you need that balance in life of being able to feel as if you're achieving, as well as having that nice time you come home to, like, make dinner and watch something nice on Netflix or whatever you watch your streaming services. To feel that you're more rounded. You need both. I need both.
I'm sorry to hear you had COVID. Linking to COVID, you're obviously in stadiums during these times. What's it like to work with no fans in?
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, I was at a semi-final, Scottish Cup semi-final a couple of weeks ago, and it's just a bit rubbish. You know, it's great to be able to see the football, and I think I feel very privileged that I'm able to get into grounds, and it's nice to be where you love to be. But it is not the same without that energy and that atmosphere of supporters. I mean, look at the change in some of the teams um, whose forms dropped dramatically, and other teams whose forms, you know, is gone up considerably because they don't have the pressure of the fans there. Other people thrive under that, some don't, and I think that the day that we can get supporters back into grounds is going to be a day I will be whooping for joy, because there's nothing better when you walk into a ground and you feel that energy and the noise and the cackle of the atmosphere of big games, and you know, bringing something different. And do you know what, like, football ultimately, sometimes we forget this, it's entertainment. You know, it's the reason, the purpose of it is to bring entertainment to people, and if the people are not there to bring entertainment to, you know, it's not really serving its purpose for me.
And with the multiple broadcasters that you've worked for, are their expectations of you any different, or are they all sort of similar?
No, I think they're pretty much the same. I think you've got expectations of yourself as well, that you keep yourself to a certain standard in terms of, you know, your quality broadcasting, your research, your you know, your preparation. All these things I think are important, and I don't tend to change that. You know, depending on who I'm working with. I think that people hire you on the basis of they know that they expect something on a certain level, and I think I would like to hope that that's what they get. You think ask them though?
That's interesting. I noticed you did an interview with David Martindale, who obviously turned his life around, going from prison to leading Livingston to that incredible unbeaten run. How would you approach those types of interviews that are sort of related to sport, but it's not all about sport?
I find that quite an easy transition because of the type of journalist I think that I am. Like I mentioned earlier, I think that for me it's all about people, and that's a really real life story, and it's a real life story of someone who's gone through something really really difficult and who has a really strong message, I think, to send out to others, to inspire them, to be a bit of a light to shine on a life that perhaps could have went a very different way, and for other people who might be, you know, in a similar position at the starting point of that and thinking that there's no way for them to change their life around or to have a pathway to something better. And I think these stories tell themselves, you know, and the most important thing to remember when you're in the other side of the seat with a microphone in your hand is to allow it to be about them, not about you. And I remember actually when before I did actually the first presentation show with Five Live, you get like a wee bit of extra training, which is brilliant. And the person who was training, Rob Northman, who's amazing broadcaster and amazing trainer, was telling me that actually a good presenter you don't hear from very often. Like a conductor, you're allowing those people to speak. Far too often you hear people who just feel as if they should be speaking for the sake of speaking because they want to feel as if they, you know, they're justifying them being there. Whereas in actual fact, you should be hearing less from that person. It's almost just allowing the other people to speak and to be guiding them along the conversation, but actually just allowing them their moment to hear what they've got to say. And that interview, I think, was a good example of that. I've just letting David tell his story, and it's an amazing story.
Yeah, it certainly was amazing. And how important is it to sort of tell those stories? Because it's easy to report something that's not as complicated, I guess. But how important is it to find those stories and really tell them?
Yeah, I think it's really important because, you know, for the reasons that I mentioned there, I think it's about ensuring that football can be used for different purposes. You know, football is such a amazing sport. We touched on it there, that it's for entertainment, but it also can be something that can engage with people where other areas of life might not. And if it can be used as something that is a positive tool, whether it be for mental health or well-being, or for you know, how you turn your life around from difficult situations, then I think it's our job as journalists to find those stories and to tell them in as sensitively a way as possible.
And for yourself now, do you have any short-term or long-term aims?
Getting out of lockdown is my short-term aim. Nah, I think it's important just to make sure that, you know, for me right now, I'm staying well, I'm staying healthy, I am doing the best I can with the jobs and the contracts and people that I work with right now, and just keep doing what I'm doing and enjoying it. You know, I think that's the most important thing for me, is just making sure that I can go to work each day and be in it, and look around you and be very grateful and thankful that I get to do the job that I do. And I try to remind myself that of each day when I'm freezing cold standing outside at a stadium somewhere.
Hopefully fans can get back in stadiums soon, but it's been terrific to have you on, Connie. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to episode 2 of Rich's Sport Media Show. If you enjoyed, make sure to look out for the following episode. We're also on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook if you would like to follow for regular content.